Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
There's thousands of patients for every one doctor. So what do? You beam into the hospital. You can have a full treatable inpatient care effect while being hundreds or thousands of miles away. And that, to me, say, oh, you've met all these celebrities. Oh, you could beam anybody anywhere. For me, it doesn't get any better than when a patient and a doctor, or when a student and a teacher have the ability to communicate in a way that almost feels like they're in person.
You just heard David Nussbaum, founder of Proto, a company that's redefining how we connect through holographic technology. As informatics physicians, Adam and I love highlighting emerging healthcare innovations, and Proto is one of the most exciting we've seen. From its roots in entertainment to transforming telemedicine, Proto is making remote care feel personal again, bringing doctors into clinics, improving patient communication, and even enhancing medical education. In this episode, we talked to David about how Proto started, its impact on healthcare today, and what's next for holographic communication in healthcare. Stay tuned.
All right. Welcome back to the NerdMD's podcast, Efficiency Unlocked. As one of your hosts, I'm Adam, and here with me is my co-host, Dale. And today we're diving into, really the cutting edge of holographic kind of communication and technology. And we're going to talk about how that could be a playing force in healthcare. So, Dale, I think during the pandemic, we switched obviously in healthcare from both in-person clinical visits and also in-person meetings to the virtual world. And, there was obviously some great things about that, but there were some pieces of it that, where video calls and just seeing that small face of someone, we're kind of missing the mark, right? Especially when you're interacting with new people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think as we transition in the pandemic to the all virtual world, we knew everybody, we were all really used to working together, and it was pretty, transition seamless. But then as I switched to a new organization after that and came in brand new to a total virtual world where everyone's got a picture or an avatar, but you haven't met them yet, you can tell the total disadvantage. So that the second you finally meet somebody in person, all of a sudden everything shifts and you know them and you can go to that virtual world. But it's totally true that there's something lost and something that we miss, especially when we think about patient care, going from in person to video to phone to chat, something's lost on that pathway.
Yeah, totally agree. And, that's why I think today, I thank you, Dale, for discovering this guest and reaching out. But we have David Nussbaum, who's here. He is the inventor and founder of Proto Hologram, a company that's really kind of bridging the gap between a pretty innovative kind of holographic technology and they're in multiple areas other than healthcare. Obviously, our slant is in healthcare, but David can talk about that and where they've kind of started using this technology in the world. And so, David, welcome to the show. Happy to have you.
Welcome.
Thanks,
welcome
Adam.
To the show.
And Dale, thanks for discovering me. I appreciate this very much. I agree with you guys. I am a broadcaster. Pre-Proto, I was a podcaster and a broadcaster. And for me, all Proto is just the evolution of broadcasting communications. I thought, wouldn't it be cool instead of talking into a microphone like you guys are doing and your listeners hearing your voice come out of a speaker? I thought, what if I could broadcast Dale? What if I could beam Dale from his home into your home and make it look like you're there? And that was the kind of basic concept behind this. And the fact that we've evolved into the ultimate way for doctors and patients to communicate and have consultations. Now we're starting to see doctors, diagnosing and even treating patients remotely. I mean, we'll get into that over the course of the show. But from the idea of just like, hey, what if I could beam into your house? I was watching Black Mirror I was watching Star Trek, and these are the sorts of things that have been promised to us for years. I thought, well, what if something like that could actually happen in real life? So now it's happening, and it's happening in healthcare. And I'm mesmerized by the team here at Proto that's putting everything together.
No, that's cool. We look forward to diving into the healthcare aspect. And, before we do that, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got this idea. I know you mentioned obviously some of the science fiction kind of inspiration for wanting to do this, but, where were you when you were kind of had the aha moment about this and really decided to kind of dive in?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not as fun as Doc Brown's story where he was standing on the edge of his toilet and he was hanging up a clock or something, and he hit his head on the corner and came up with the idea for time travel. So not as fun as that, but it really just goes back to when I was a child. I remember being 6 or 7 years old, and I'm from the East Coast, so I was listening to a lot of like New York Mets games I was watching them on TV, and my buddies and I, we would just by habit we turn the volume down on the TV, and we would just start calling the play-by-play. We didn't know that was a job. Like, somebody actually does that for a living. They call the game. And I was always fascinated by the ability to communicate, broadcast. Journalism was one of my passions. I would, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I would try to get onto every red carpet, and I'd try to interview every person. And I would always ask them a question that they'd never been asked before. I like to dig deep. I like to really understand what motivates people. I started a podcast in 2008, long before the podcast boom happened, and I felt like it was a successful way to meet people, learn about people, communicate, and so the aha moment happened. I'm doing my podcast. It's probably 2010, 2011. And I interviewed a guy who I'd known from the Howard Stern show. His name is Johnny Fratto. And he rest in peace now for all you Howard Stern fans. Johnny Fratto knew a guy who owned some rarely used patents, almost never used. They were collecting dust. They had won them in an auction. These patents were Pepper's Ghost patents that were used as a magic trick over the years, but there was really no scalable use case on how these Pepper's Ghost patents can be used to communicate. And so I did a little bit of research. I found out how those patents can be used. We gathered up some investment money. We licensed those patents, and then we started bringing back late legends to posthumously perform using this new holographic technique called Pepper's Ghost. Those patents were later used in 2012 to famously digitally resurrect the late iconic Tupac Shakur, materialized him on stage in front of a sold-out crowd that were just perplexed by what they were seeing. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before. So we went in business. We just started bringing back all these incredible icons to posthumously perform. But for me, long story short, the aha moment was, what if instead of bringing back the dead, I used my now hologram knowledge to connect the living? So the Pepper's Ghost patents are very cumbersome. They're very expensive to actually execute on a large scale. I mean, it requires like stages and trust structures, and like you have scrims, and like if you go to Universal Studios, they're there. If you go into Disney, they're there. But it can't go in a doctor's office. It can't go in a conference room. It can't go in your living room. So I tinkered, and I figured out a way to make them better and more scalable. And so instead of bringing back the dead, Proto connects the living. That aha moment, I drew it on the back of it didn't look like this. It was a completely different form factor, but it evolved to a functional display that I just took to every trade show, every convention. I was bringing it to every Comic-Con that would let me through the door. I didn't have any money left. I'd spent all my money on prototypes. And eventually enough people saw it. They thought it was good enough to create a business around. We started raising money, and then we built out the company from there.
No, that's great. What was some of the first use cases as it was picking up steam that were the most exciting, that people really resonated the most with?
Yeah, I mean, entertainment and marketing, it's a whiz bang, like, whoa, there's a hologram here. So we were doing all the trade shows, all the conventions. One of the first things that we did, though, I think successfully, like on an international visibility basis, was the iHeart Music Festival, where we beamed Kane Brown from Nashville into Hollywood, where he couldn't physically be, where he performed with Sway Lee, who was physically there, and Khalid, who was physically there, and the three of them all performed together. That was in 2020. So that's only 5 years ago at this point. So a lot has happened since then, but in 2019, we started the company. I filed for the patents. I put the business model together. I just started. In fact, I was just showing people how to use the technology out of my living room, and by 2020, we were in business. Of course, the world had shut down, and there was no concerts happening. There was no in-person things happening. So as the ultimate hybrid tool, Proto allowed for Kane Brown, who couldn't get on an airplane, couldn't physically go 3,000 miles away. Nobody knew what was happening. This was like March or April of 2020. This is brand new COVID. So Khalid and Sway Lee were there. Where's Kane Brown? How's he getting here? So we beamed him in. When you can't be there, beam there. And that's where the idea of this sort of mix and match hologram and real concert type setting. And now we've done that hundreds of times since then.
Right.
We've worked with Elton John and John Bon Jovi, and we've worked with all these incredible artists, Olivia Rodrigo, and but yeah, it all started with I think that might have been the first one that was recognized.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, I remember seeing all of your excellent social media type presence, and clearly I got attention with the medical side as well. I wanted to reach out to see how this is going to fit in. But I remember seeing your UFC one, where you had somebody, at one of the events. It's just the concept of like you get to go see like an athlete or someone in person. How big are they really? What do they look like right in front of them without like a crowd of people, stomping in the way? Seemed like a pretty cool idea.
Yeah. Here's Dana White. Yeah, for UFC, we beamed Dana White in English and in Spanish. Dana Blanco was trending globally. I mean, SportsCenter picked it up, ESPN, all the MMA sites. Yeah, I mean it's great because like his feet look like they're on the floor. He appears like he's there, and he was able to communicate to his fans in a new way, and so obviously that got a lot of people's attention.
And our listeners can't see, but behind David was a life-size David walking around behind on loop, and now Dana White is there. Can you give the audience in words just a little bit more about like how does Proto work at the high level? What are they looking at, and what the experience is like?
Fantastic. Yeah. So the technology, it reminds me of, if you've ever seen this movie called The Time Machine. There was a moment in The Time Machine where what's his name? Oh, shoot. Anyway, there's a moment where the gentleman, if you want to Google this and help me out, there's Orlando.
Can we get AI, David?
Yeah, right. Well, we can probably do that. So it's a panel of glass. There's a panel of glass surrounded by a frame. It looks like something you would walk into a museum, walk into a gallery. You see a frame with a little bit of depth. There's 2 feet of depth behind the frame, and it's fully lit from the inside. There's a light box projecting tens of thousands of lumens of interior light surrounding what ends up looking like a completely solid subject, whether it's a person like Dana White or a heart, or a doctor or a patient or whatever it is, or whoever it is inside of this display. It's We were originally called Portal, and now we're Proto. But the idea was that it's a window from one place to another. You step in front of any camera, could be an iPhone, and you appear thousands of miles away, like you're really there. If you're 5'11", you appear 5'11". You have shadows, reflections, all the things that holograms aren't supposed to have. Orlando Jones, thank you so much, Mindy. Real time. So Orlando Jones is the actor that plays this character. He plays a protonic hologram, and he's behind a panel of glass. And he knows everything. He's AI, but he's conversational. He's got emotion. He's got a physical presence. And so that was part of the inspiration behind this physical display of what Proto is. So the displays have evolved over time. They're sleek now. They're thin. They have rounded edges. They're even small. I've got a Wonka vision. I have a tabletop version where it's only 2 feet tall. It's it's less than 1/5 scale, and we're seeing those in medical labs. We're seeing those on doctors' desks, and so patients could beam into a doctor's office, or a doctor could beam into a remote clinic, like we're doing with West Cancer Center, into these displays. It's like those small ones look like a holographic iPad. It's like an iPad with some depth, and instead of a flat screen, it looks like a window into the display itself. And the large one is it's like some people have called it described it as like a holographic, like a Barbie box, so you could see into it. And it's remarkable. It really looks like there's a person in the same space with you. And one of the things that really blows my mind is and these things, Dale, you were mentioning how you saw this on social media, or we do a lot of social media. Almost never does somebody say, I just saw a hologram of Howie Mandel, or I just saw a hologram of Olivia Rodrigo. They say, I just met Howie Mandel. I just met Olivia Rodrigo. It feels, there's a sense of presence that just doesn't exist. Like, I'm looking at you guys, Adam and Dale. I'm looking at you guys on a screen. We're engaged. We're having a great conversation. I'm looking into your eyes. Like, we are communicating. But I don't believe that you're actually sitting at my desk in front of me. That's the difference between communicating and connecting. Proto would make it look like Adam and Dale are in the room with me, and that's the idea behind the technology.
Yeah,
I think it's fascinating how, all of us grew up with obviously screen technology getting better and better, higher resolution, better color accuracy, better cameras, so people, I think back to my parents, and they used to fantasize about the Jetsons, and like just a video call, and now obviously video calls are commonplace. Like the younger generation doesn't even do phone calls anymore. They only do video calls if they're going to talk. So yeah, super, super interesting. And I think that when you see something in 3D, without needing some sort of goggles, mask, glasses, whatever, I think it is pretty impressive. Whatever the technology is, that's kind of driving that. And I do think it brings that sense of realism, into the conversation, which we kind of alluded to in the intro. And I mean, I think, I think we should shift to healthcare, some of these applications. And I know you just mentioned a few of those, but, obviously Dale and I, we've done both in person. We're primary care physicians, so we've done both plenty of in-person care, but, we've also done a handful of virtual methods, obviously text-based, phone-based, and, video-based. But so how, other than what we've kind of talked about, or maybe you could share how some of these use cases are right now that are using Proto, but how does this holographic communication stack up? Both for the clinicians using it and, the patients that are able to interact in this way.
Well, it depends on who is using it, but it's being used in medical centers as a way for doctors and patients to have their consultations. We will be, I don't know when this episode drops, but we are going to be HIPAA compliant. Like, it started out mostly first being used as a tool in classrooms. And so we're in the University of Central Florida, for example, it's the medical school there, and they were using it as a means of instructional, educational, as a way for doctors to train future healthcare providers remotely. You can have the best doctors in the world, the best teachers in the world. They don't have to physically be there in the school or in the university. They could beam in. They do their lecture. They give their speech. By the way, I can see you. I can hear you. I'm not just speaking. I'm engaged with you. And the students, the medical students, weren't sitting back in their chairs like, I've seen this on TV or I've seen this on a Zoom. They were sitting on the edges of their seats. So they're learning, they're engaged. So it started out as a way of training, education, very important, obviously, but it's evolved. We will be HIPAA compliant really soon. We're at a certification level of privacy, encryption, and all things data privacy, called SOC 2 compliant. We're enterprise and government level grade certified. So it's very important to us that the most important thing is that our data doesn't leak. You can't break in and glean any kind of information from whether it's a pre-recorded playback on demand or whether it's AI or whether it's a doctor beaming in live. But now, West Cancer Center, amazing. The best doctors in Tennessee. Let's say West Cancer Center in Memphis has this cancer doctor that's in high demand. And let's say in Paris, Tennessee, at one of their small rural clinics, this doctor can't physically be there, hundreds of miles away, to give good or bad news. You don't want to give bad news over Zoom or over the phone, or even have any kind of consultation for that matter. I think, that is it is an option, but I think being in person is oftentimes the best means of communication. So
absolutely.
Zoom, it's sort of like where Zoom leaves off and where physically being there begins. So now doctors can beam into the smaller rural clinics where these doctors are not as able to be there. So now patients don't have to wait days or weeks for the doctor to be on site, and the patients don't have to drive hundreds of miles away to the doctor to have this face-to-face communication. They are now able to beam in, have these high-level consultations, and pretty soon, when we're HIPAA, the ability to communicate about their healthcare will only get better. And then in some other parts of the world, in India and in other locations, Australia, where there's vast territory but smaller populations, patients are now able to beam into the hospitals. So imagine you have no access to a high-level doctor of your choice, like in India, for example. I mean, there's 1 million doctors, but there's 1 billion people. It's hard to find a doctor. There's thousands of patients for every one doctor. So what do? You beam into the hospital. You can have a full treatable inpatient care effect while being hundreds or thousands of miles away. And that, to me, they say, oh, you've met all these celebrities. Oh, you could beam anybody anywhere. For me, it doesn't get any better than when a patient and a doctor, or when a student and a teacher have the ability to communicate in a way that almost feels like they're in person.
No, that makes a lot of sense when you explain it that way. For what's most common in terms of, I'm trying to picture it all, but like, it sounds like the patients are more commonly, they have the device, and then providers will have an iPhone or some way of beaming in. Is that the most common, or?
Not yet. I think in time that will be the most common. We're always working on our hardware. It really comes down to how can patients afford the hardware in their homes. Right now, they're in the clinics, Indigenous Pact, West Cancer Center, Mount Sinai, San Antonio Breast Cancer. So all these schools, medical facilities, hospitals, and clinics, they're either buying or leasing our hardware and the software services. And then patients can beam in using an iPhone. Free app on the iPhone at the Apple Store, Proto Studio, and you just put it on the tripod and you hit the go button and you could beam, and it's like having a Zoom on your end, but you physically appear like you're there. So I'd say it's going in both directions. Maybe a patient goes into a clinic where they have one and the doctor is in the hospital and he or she beams in. It really depends on what the use case is. I believe, though, one day it will be as common as Zoom or FaceTime, because the effect of a physical presence is more important than just the ability to communicate. You really need to connect. You really need to have the ability to look into somebody's eyes, to not just look into their eyes, but if you're dealing with life and death situations, you kind of have to be there. And this is a format that can give these doctors and patients that opportunity, even though they may be hundreds or thousands of miles away.
Yeah. Obviously I think you're describing this, but I'm just curious if you could tell us, when this happened to you the first time. But have you met somebody for the first time on the device, and then you met them in real life and it felt differently, sort of towards what Adam described? I think we've all felt like, oh, that's what you look like in 3D. I know you now. Do you remember that first time you saw someone in 3D and it wasn't like that?
Yeah, for sure. I could, like, my favorite is it's not the first. So I meet a lot of people a first time. Usually it's me beaming into them. So I don't Zoom. I Proto. I've got showrooms all over the world. Knock on wood, it's happening. People are starting to put our technology in their boardrooms, in their conference rooms, in their innovation centers. And I go on a world tour in a week without leaving Los Angeles. So they see me for the first time as a hologram or as a proto hologram. And when they meet me in person, it's an accurate description. Like, they feel like they've met me before because I'm there. I don't know how tall you guys are. I don't know. Like, I see shoulders up. So I don't know. It's kind of, it was interesting coming out of COVID, meeting people that I'd only met on Zoom. I'm like, oh, you're taller than I thought you'd be, or wow, you have legs. Like, but with Proto, there is no difference. You feel like you know the people. I have holograms of my parents. My parents are both in their 80s. I miss them so much. They're on the East Coast. They live in New Jersey. I'm on the West Coast. Anytime I'm missing them, I have my parents in the Proto. And this is important because I've got 3 children under 10. I've got a 10-year-old, and I've got 9 and 10-year-old daughters, and I have a 3-year-old son. And my kids know their grandparents, even though they're 3,000 miles away from each other. We don't FaceTime. We don't Zoom. I guess sometimes we do, but we have devices in our homes. They have a device in their home. I have a device in my home. We beam into each other's homes. We look like we're together. There's such a reality that comes with this technology. It's such a sense of comfort, that knowing that they're with you in the same room. I see. The other day, we haven't posted this anywhere on social media. On a whim, we beamed Howie Mandel into King of Prussia Mall in Philadelphia. On a whim. We didn't promote this. He didn't talk about it on his social. He just beamed in, and at the exact same time, a young lady was walking by. I have all the footage because you could get return feeds, and so I could see everything that's happening on both sides. She had an emotional breakdown. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She's like, "How are you here?" She had seen our technology used on TV, on the Kardashians or on Big Brother or something. She's like, "I didn't know that this was a real thing. I thought this was just like a TV thing." And he says, "No, I'm here. I can see you. Like, tell me." And they had a great conversation. Tears were coming down her face. Like, just blasting out of her eyes because she was having an experience that was so real to her that he absolutely made her day. We were just doing it for a goof. We thought it'd be kind of a fun like marketing stunt, but he changed her day. He gave her this experience that never could have existed otherwise. Things like that happen all the time. I love Howie. I think he's become such a great friend, and for him, if you asked him if he was here, he has said this, so I'm not putting words in his mouth. He says this is not for entertainment. This, for him, it's a medical device. He's self-admitted germaphobe, and he's got obsessive compulsive disorder and other mental health issues that he's always working on every single day. And for him, he says, I want to be everywhere without going anywhere. I think that this is a medical device because you're giving me freedom to be in places that I wouldn't physically travel to or be around, and people can walk right up to me, and I'm not like, hey, 6 feet or 10 feet, give me space. This is a way to be close to people, to communicate with people, to interact with people in a way that he had never been able to do that before. So it is a freedom technology. It gives you a lot of ability, and in some cases, it's better than physically being there, because whether you're a doctor giving a presentation or Howie Mandel or whoever performing somewhere, you could be in more than one place at a time. This gives you that near supernatural ability to multiply yourself. Have you ever wished you could be in more than one place at a time? Like, people say that all the day. I say, I only have, it's just me. I can't be in more than one place at a time. You can be in more than one place at a time. And you could be in Japan speaking Japanese. You could be in Spain speaking Spanish. You could be in France speaking French while speaking English in the United States. So you can communicate to patients or your fans or whoever is the audience. You could communicate in the language that they're most comfortable speaking and or interacting in. So communication level just goes way up at that point.
No, it's super cool. I think of in healthcare, there's a common thing called grand rounds, where a speaker comes into a hospital and gives kind of a lecture on their expertise talk. And what you just said could totally fit into that mantra, like where it could be a world-renowned medical expert, and they could be holding grand rounds in multiple universities across the world and don't have to travel, because those things are all costly and time consuming and challenging for someone who's an expert. Super cool. I think, I'd love to pivot, David, into, what you alluded to in the beginning around some of the AI that's being kind of baked into this. And, it sounds like you guys have created kind of a way that this technology can be conversational, like some of the conversational AIs that I think some people are kind of becoming more familiar with publicly. But what can you share about that for the listeners and us?
It's remarkable just how fast the world evolves and how fast technology continues to perform. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that Proto would be the face of AI. I always figured, if you can't be there, beam there, even trademarked beam there. Like, it's about beaming, it's about broadcasting. But somehow I hit the lottery, and some incredible technology brains and software engineers, and these folks say, we are this. We should be this. We should be not just beaming people places, but when you can't beam somewhere, your avatar can take over, and your avatar will have all of these abilities. And this is what they told me years ago. And I'm like, okay, cool. I like watching movies too, but this is a real thing. But we are AI agnostic, which I am in love with, because not every company or person or event requires a specific type of LLM or avatar. So we have several AIs hooked up to a number of different LLM models, right? So I have my AI is hooked up to Grok, and then maybe Howie Mandel's AI is hooked up to ChatGPT, and then perhaps Tim Draper or some other is hooked up to Amazon. What is it, a Bedrock, or So we have the ability to integrate any company's AI into our platform. We are like a hologram Apple computer where you could create app. You could create these AI applications so that your avatar, whether it's a HeyGen or Code Baby or Soul Machines, like they're all building these avatars, and then they're hooking it up to different backends that can then be designed in a way to be as open or as closed of a data set as you want, which is really great. Like my AI, I'm like, open that thing up. I want to know everything about everything, and I want to be able to speak in every language. And between you and me, I've made my AI about 2 inches taller and 10 pounds lighter. I know 217 languages, and I'm brilliant. My AI, that is. But in some cases, like when you walk into a doctor's office and you want the AI avatar to be very specific about only stuff that happens in that office during office hours. Maybe you only want it to speak the 3 or 4 languages that are most commonly used in that office. Maybe you only want to talk about all the things that just happen within the parameters of what the doctor wants to communicate. You can't ask her, hey, what's your favorite television show? Like it's that her AI will say something about, it's probably something, medical related, but I'm here to talk about your health and about setting up your appointment for the next time you come in. And so you can open or close the data set to reveal as much information or as little information as you want, which I find fascinating. And we have a team of incredible engineers that are singularly focused on moving forward in this direction. Oh, check this out. We just did this amazing event with AWS called reInvent. Almost 100,000 people showed up. We were at the Venetian just last week. And I didn't quite understand why we were doing this. It had to be explained to me why this was happening. But you walk in and there's 2 Proto boxes, 2 Proto machines with different AIs in there. Each AI had its own individual data set. And the AIs were talking to each other. I go, well, why wouldn't we just have one AI that just has the answers? Like I go on ChatGPT all the time and I type in something and it gives me the answer. And it was then revealed to me that's not real life. In fact, that's what a lot of people are nervous about and afraid about. So one AI, an all-knowing, godlike kind of AI, shortcuts to the answer in the fastest amount of time. But if you have 2 AIs, each with its own very specific skill set and knowledge base, like real people have, they can give their answers based on your question, and then they start debating with each other about what is the final answer. What should the answer be? I think it should be this. No, I think it should be this. And they debate. They even argue. I watched the 2 AIs at reInvent get creative to the point where they even had a meeting of the minds, and they came up with a compromise. And the answer was different than if they just shortcut to it if they were on their own. So that's real life. So the human walked up to it and had a 3-person conversation with a human and 2 AIs, and they all kind of collaborated on an answer together. It blew my mind. That's the future of how AIs and humans can communicate. I watched it happen. It blew my mind. I'm so impressed with our engineers and AWS for doing that kind of stuff.
Super cool. I mean, that's like, I think there's a lot of talk in medicine right now, about how this stuff is going to apply eventually to, expert clinicians. And I think that same sort of thing is possible, where, could each expert clinician eventually have their own kind of specific kind of LLM agent, that has all of their kind of knowledge that they have, the way they like to do things, the way they do, based on evidence, et cetera. But, and I mean, it's even a way like right now, I mean, this seems like crazy, but, patients always want a second opinion. I mean, you can imagine a consultation where it could potentially be with two kind of specialists, it's super, super interesting. And it's, it's great that conversational LLM technology came along and was able to kind of be plugged in. It's super cool.
And it's generative, and it's got vision too. I could walk up to my AI and I could say, how many fingers am I holding up? And something as simple as that, or I can hold up an equation and it'll answer. It sees it. It's got camera. It's got vision.
Yeah.
But you could see how important that would be in a healthcare setting, in a medical setting, where they might be able to read something that's going on with you physically, and then log that, and then make sure the doctor is aware of it prior to the in-person meeting. So I mean, there's a whole lot of different ways AI can not just change lives, but extend
even
lives.
walking into a hospital, right? Like you walk into a hospital, you don't know what door you're going into, where your loved one is. So having something like this ready for you that knows everything about where everything is in that hospital, a specific, train of training. I mean, that would be comforting even.
Wayfinding and holographic directory and information booth. I mean, just yesterday, I turned on the news and I saw that in Jacksonville, Florida, they installed one of our holographic displays in the airport, and Mayor Deegan, I think is her name, the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, is in there as the wayfinding directory. So as travelers come in from all over the world, the first person that greets them as they step foot off of the airplane is the mayor of the city that they're flying into, and she speaks 36 languages. Her AI does. I don't know how many languages. I'm sure she's brilliant on her own. However, that is something that's actually happening. So you could take the idea of that, and you can. That's your use case. It works. Travelers are excited, and now you can see how that might work in a more of a one-on-one patient-doctor setting.
Yeah, super cool, David. That no, thanks for sharing all this stuff with us. I think, before we kind of wrap up, we'd love to do what we call our Nerd Alert Lightning Round, where we find out a little bit more about you and things right at the end. You cool with that for the last few minutes here? Yes,
let's go. Let's do it. And if I don't have the answer, I'll just ask my AI.
That would be fine too. And you can also pass. These aren't tough. All right, Dale, why don't you hit him with the first?
Sure.
This is where I reveal my true intelligence. Okay. We'll find out what direction I go.
No, we did all the hard stuff. Now we just have some fun. So first up, what's a book that had a significant impact on you? Could be recent, could be old.
I'd say as a child, Mad Magazine was my favorite magazine. Look, I always thought about, literature. What did I read an incredible book recently about D.B. Cooper. Oh my God. Do you know about this guy? Holy cow. I love true crime. True crime is so interesting to me because I like to see, as a journalist, or had the brain of a journalist, I like to really get into somebody's mind. And this, I forget the name of the book, but D.B. Cooper is a fascinating subject. I don't know if that's such a good answer or not, but
No, it's cool. And I loved Mad Magazine too as a kid. Those are awesome.
Come on now.
What's a favorite hobby that you have outside of professional life?
I love my hobby. Well, I used to be a podcaster, so my hobby was podcasting. I did 350 episodes. Very early, I met my wife on my podcast. My podcast changed my life. I used it as a way of meeting people that I found to be really interesting. And we would do the podcast from my living room. This is all pre, COVID and stuff. Now everything's on remote. But so I find broadcasting to be a hobby of mine. I now have 3 children, so my hobbies are their hobbies, if that makes sense. They love doing they love doing gymnastics, and my Francis is in Taekwondo. Lucy is in gymnastics and musical theater. So I'm going to all their events with them. I'm sort of reliving my childhood through them. It's my most fun thing to do.
Totally resonates with both of us.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, we have young kids.
How old are your kids?
I've got 9.
Mine are 11 and 13, so they're transitioning from young to not young, but still doing lots of stuff.
No, 9-year-olds for me. We're doing gymnastics and ballet and all the fun stuff.
Okay, well, good. So
I get
you
it.
guys get it.
I want to change this next question because I want to talk about, like you said, you've done a lot of really interesting podcasts that you enjoyed. Other than the episode with your wife, which is obviously one of your favorites, what was your favorite guest that you had?
Sam Simon, may he rest in peace, was my first ever guest. I don't think my podcast would have ever happened. Nobody knew what a podcast was. I was one of the first 1,000 podcasts on the Apple platform. Like, nobody knew podcasts. It was not a thing, I guess, at least with the people that I spoke to. I couldn't get a guest to save my life. And then Sam Simon, who famously co-created The Simpsons, and later on was the executive producer of Taxi, and he worked on all these shows. He was my first guest, and then he would post about what an incredible experience he had, and it was very easy for me to book guests after that. I had guests like Gilbert Gottfried and Henry Hill. That was an exciting one for me. Henry Hill, the subject matter of the movie Goodfellas. I mean, he's a gangster murderer. By the way, everybody I'm talking about are all gone now. I don't know if this is becoming a theme or not, but I had these people in my home. Like, Henry Hill would talk about robbing banks and it was insane. So I just loved. But yeah, my wife's. Honey, if you're listening, you were my favorite podcast episode.
Good answer.
It was. My wife won a reality show. And I was a super fan of her. And I couldn't believe that she even said yes to the podcast. And then here we are all these years later with 3 kids of our, it's just, you can't, I'm telling you, podcasting, what you guys are doing, all the fact that you're doctors, nothing compared to podcasting. That is life-changing stuff.
No, it's cool. We do get to meet a lot of cool people. And that's honestly, that's why Dale and I wanted to start doing this too, to meet people and meet people in different industries. I mean, like yourself, that's doing stuff outside. I guess, so if you could have, this is, I know this question's pretty common sometimes on shows, like on podcasts, but if you could have dinner with anybody, either historical or present, who would that be and why?
Well, I am a super fan of Howard Stern, and I got to meet him once in person. He probably wouldn't remember me if we met. I'd love to have dinner with Howard. I have a few politicians that I'd love to meet, but I won't reveal that because I don't want half the country to hate me and the other half to love me.
Enough.
I've learned my lesson. I met Larry David. We did a hologram event with Larry. I'd love to eat dinner. I'd love to have lunch with Larry David. I'd love to go to like Cantor's Deli and sit down and have lunch with Larry David. And of course, my buddy Howie Mandel. He's a dream to hang out with. And if anybody is ever asked this question in the future, Howie makes a great lunch date. So I think, but yeah, I love comedy. I love film. I love music. Howard, I remember it was 1990 or 1991, and I was a sophomore or junior in high school. I was listening to WPLJ, Scott and Todd in the morning. It was 95.5. And then it was a commercial break. I switched the station to 106.3 KLSX, and Howard Stern was on the radio. And this is heyday Howard Stern. He's a much different broadcaster now. It's just a different type of show, but like, we're talking about the man who was challenging the FCC every single day. Their podcasts exist because Howard made long form interview a thing. I mean, before that you had David Letterman, you had Johnny Carson, but those interviews were 3 or 4 minutes. Like, you wouldn't get to ever sit down with somebody for an hour. But Howard was sort of the first to kind of do these like uncensored long form interviews and really allow a journalist to kind of dig in. So he inspired me to do everything that led to where I am today. I'd love to meet Howard, have dinner with him. He'd say no in 2 seconds though, but a boy could dream.
No, that's awesome. Any other ones, Adam?
No, I mean, I think just in the interest of time, we want to be respectful of your time, David. Obviously, pleasure to have you on, and really, I mean, Dale and I are geeks around technology, but any type of technology that has the potential to augment healthcare for the better, for patients, clinicians, and the like, we're going to generally be fans of. So we'll continue to follow you and follow what's going on with Proto. And
hey, quick question.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a favorite lunch date? Who's your answer? Living or dead? Who do you want to have lunch with?
I mean, for me, sports were so big when I was a kid. There were several athletes that I looked up to that I would love to be able to have a longer conversation with. Probably back in my childhood, I mean, my biggest fan was Jerry Rice of the 49ers.
Sure.
And, just a stand-up guy. And I honestly think even to this day, it would probably still be him, just to reflect on.
Invite him on the podcast.
I should.
I'm telling you, and then we'll get to Dale in a second, but on my podcast, I was a super fan of the New York Mets growing up. We talked about that earlier. I was obsessed with this guy, Greg Jeffries. I don't know if I think I might be a little bit older than both of you, but Greg Jeffries was the second baseman for the New York Mets in 1987, 1988. I interviewed him on my podcast like 10 or 12 years ago. And we've become friends. We're friends now. I'm friends with the guy that his posters were on my wall. I'm telling you, you should ask Jerry Rice to be on your podcast. It's insane because this is like, you get to meet. This isn't like a conversation. It's a bit more emotional. You're more. It's a bit more of a sticky kind of a relationship because we're getting to know each other in a way that a normal conversation just doesn't happen. So I would love to hear about your podcast with Jerry Rice. What about you,
I love
Dale?
how we have, we started with technology, but now we have podcast history. And I think that this is has been really fun change for me. True to me would be with my family. I just want to have a nice meal, lunch, wife, kids, and relax and spend time with them.
Very good answer. I should have thought of that.
But that's why your picture of your parents really got to me too, is this concept of having memories on your desk that are real memories that you could save, like you said, as people are getting older. I mean, that's a really, emotional concept.
Well, this has been a lot of fun for me.
Absolutely.
And sorry I didn't stick to the subject matter entirely, but I'm just having fun with you. I love podcasters. I love what you're doing. I love how you give people like me opportunities to kind of spread my message to your audience who I may not get to reach otherwise. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.